I'll see you in the land of Mordor. Death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates of fun, destroy the ring of power and wonder.
Hi, Roman Daisel here with another video about Middle-earth role-playing game courtesy of Iron Crown Enterprises. We're going to be looking at Northern Merkwood, the Wood-Elves realm. This is number 2600 of the campaign series, and it was the 4th campaign module that came out. This one was released in 1984, and it details just the northern areas of Merkwood from the Old Forest Road up to the Grey Mountains, and does include part of the Iron Hills. It touches on that briefly. You get this book with 6 major layouts. It's got the 16 by 20 full color double-sided detachable map sheet. It has the settings from The Hobbit, and it maps out Lake Town, Dale, and the Wood Elf Village. And then you go through Mirkwood itself and encounter great eagles, giant spiders, bears, wolves, and dragons of the withered hearth. So you got a pretty good range of what you can meet. Though for the most part, you're just going to be trekking through woods until you run into something. And it also has, on the far side, you can see Beorn's house and the Carrock, where the eagles dropped off 13 dwarves and a hobbit and a wizard. And then you can also see the Old Forest Road is way up there. So the map was pretty cool. I love how they do these maps. The Iron Crown team, how they do these huge colored maps with great detail. So you could follow the Old Forest Road to the Enchanted Stream, all the way to the Wood Elves capital of Thranduil, down to Esgaroth on Long Lake, and then up to Dale and Erebor. And it also goes up to the Iron Hills, and then all the way up to the Grey Mountains, where the dragons are from. So this map was really cool. I love these maps. And the cool thing about most of the campaign modules is the more you get, then you can actually put these maps together, and they make a huge, almost complete map of northwestern Middle-earth, where the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings took place. So on the other side, they give the layout of Dale, the layout of what's called Celebanon, which is the Wood Elves encampment when they bring stuff down the barrels at a bond scene. And then you have Esgaroth on the Long Lake, so Lake Town. So you got 3 ideal settings. Now, like any campaign book, they give you notes on the features in the setting, and they talk about the various races and general geographical descriptions of things, and how you can adapt this module to your own fantasy role-playing campaign. So they give you some basic guidelines, some basic definitions of stuff, and how things work. And then it gives you the color-coded map and describes the geographical locations. Like this one's pretty cool. It tells you where the Wood Elves are, where there's orcs. And because this is set in the 17th century, just after the Great Plague, so 1640, that's their general timeline for anything, when the balance of good and evil is in the middle. Good is still powerful, but evil is starting to rise up. And they give you the various plains. So the Eothram were down just below, more into southern Mirkwood area on the Great Plains, and people called the Grammas, who are also Northmen, were in the northern part between Long Lake and the Iron Hills. Easterling is called the Sagoth, which is north of the Iron Hills, and they're also east of the Rune. Then you have the Dalemen and the Lakemen. At this time, there are no dwarves in Erebor. The dwarves, for the most part, are in the Iron Hills or up in the Grey Mountains, or in Moria. Moria was still occupied at this time. And of course, you got some orcs in the mountains, orcs up here, the Asharag, the Bejabar, who are the Beornings. And it gives you where they are in the book itself. So it gives you the introduction to Mirkwood, Northern Mirkwood in 1640, the overview of the land. So it goes into detail. They take as many references from the books as they can, and then make up everything else, but according to the spirit of Tolkien, as much as possible. Of course, Tolkien wouldn't agree with half what they do, but beggars can't be choosers. And then they talk about the animals. You see the great eagles, the dragons, the giant spiders, the bears, wolves. Even talks about the Great Plague, the flea, and they blame it on a flea, which makes sense. Then they also go into the shadow of the forest. So this is at the same time that the necromancer, Sauron, has returned to the forest, and he's been there for 600 years. slowly building his power. Then it goes into the various cultures. So it talks about the Wood-Elves. It talks about the Wood-Elves in great length. And the coming of Thranduil. Mentions dwarves and a brief dwarven history. The dwarves aren't really big in this scenario. It talks mostly about the ones in the Iron Hills. And then you have the Northmen and the Gondorian overlords to the south. And it explains who the Northmen are in this setting. Then next it goes into power, politics, and power. So again, this is at a time when the Great Plague has disrupted things, just like it did in Europe back in the day. And then more importantly, it goes into the settlements, settlement patterns. It talks about Celebanon, and it even gives you the halls of the Elven King. Now, Iron Crown later did their own little module on the halls of the Elven King, which is much better. This is just a basic one. And it has most of the important places. It'll have the cells, the prisons, and it'll have where the barrels at a bond scene is, the wine cellars, and where 13 dwarves and a hobbit escaped. And it also gives you an orcish citadel to look at. And then another place over a waterfall in Merkwood itself called the Sarn Gorwig, which is run by an evil elf. And then this one I wish they had done as a standalone, but they also give you Erebor when the dwarves arrive in 1999 to the Third Age. And it briefly gives you some descriptions of the Lonely Mountain at that time. I wish they had done an individual Lonely Mountain campaign book or fortress book, which would have been really much cooler than what they did here, because there's so much detail in The Hobbit concerning Erebor and so much more written. But it does give you the Chamber of Thrar. Then it also goes back to the western side of Mirkwood, and you go to Carrock, and it's considered they have it more as a holy place, because in the Hobbit, Beorn often sits there and looks towards the Misty Mountains. So they made it into like a holy shrine, kind of like your old Celtic shrines that you find in Ireland and northern Scotland. And then it gives you one in the Iron Hills of an evil cult, Nahad Kudan, and the tombs of the Uthil Book. So again, it doesn't give you any real, it gives suggested for adventure and game master aids. You can visit Beorn's home, actions in the Grey Mountains, in the Withered Hearth. Doesn't really give much of a description of the dragons themselves, and doesn't have any real adventure set forward. Not like in the Court of Ardor, or in the later campaign modules. It just tells you what you can do. And then the one I love, it gives you the master military charts. I thought it kind of downplayed the Manish races. They should have had more men living on an open plain, steppe plains. And for the Wood-Elves, it doesn't really give you the full numbers of Thranduil's kingdom. But I always love the military campaigns. And then it goes into the individual NPC charts. And it does mention the dragons of the Withered Earth, like which ones you can find. And gives a general location. Kinds of things you can find. Special herbs. I never worried too much about the herb stuff. And then finally it goes to economics, what you can buy. And then campaign and adventure suggestions. And then it goes northern Mirkwood at other times. So how things got disrupted with invasions and stuff. And it goes into more detail about the Third Age. And that's about it. And then it gets selected. I like how it gets selected reading, so you can actually go and look at this stuff. And then the last thing they have is they actually have the catalog inside the back. The prices back then were pretty good. Angmar was only $10 US. So back then that would have been like 13 Canadian. Christ, I wish they were still these prices when I was buying this stuff. So I have the second edition Merkwood book. In the later 80s, they stopped making Northern and Southern Mirkwood on their own and combined the two books into one big campaign book. They didn't really change anything, unfortunately, which I wish they had. So I didn't get this one. I got the second edition one, and I had to buy this on eBay. And it had to go to Canada, my mom, and then my mom had to send it to me in Korea because I was so interested in seeing if it was any different than the one I already had, when it wasn't. But it was part of the collection. And then over in Korea, I had these maps laminated so I could protect them better. And I find the maps really cool. I can't remember what I paid off eBay. It was a lot. And this is back in the early 1999, 2000. So it was a long time ago when I bought this. Anyway, like I said, I wish they had gone into more detail with the Erebor and the halls of the Elven King, as well as the Iron Hills. They could have did another layout with them, and they could have gave more different timelines with the region of Dale. Dale at its beginning, which is what they did in 1640. Dale at its peak when the dwarves were there, and then Dale after it's been refounded. I wish they'd done that. Gone into the late Third Age during the War of the Ring. I would love to know what the military stats and how populous it was then, because trade would have rebounded quickly once the dwarves had reclaimed Erebor. So anyway, that's all I have on Northern Mirkwood. I loved playing this game in the late 80s, early 90s. Play with the most unlikely people who you would never think would play this stuff. Anything from jocks to rednecks to guys like me who are part of both, who are more multifaceted. I play a lot of sports, but I also like reading books. And it was just one of those things. It was a good way to spend the night, spend a night or a day in between girlfriends. So anyway, anyone else play this game? Let me know what you guys, if you guys have this module, what you guys thought of this module. I'm gonna release other stuff as well. Until next time, this is Roma De Salamat here.